Welcome to the Solemn YuGiOh channel. Today we are discussing something very interesting based on a comment we got here. I was gonna make a video about this anyway, but since I got a comment, I'm just gonna try and explain based on that comment. Because it's something I see a lot of people think that is not correct. So we'll get to that. So a comment from Jerry Zhang. Thank you so much for commenting. Love your content, Solemn, but there is a major flaw with your argument. MTG and Pokemon is a completely different game from Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is even very different from Vanguard and Wise. Well, Vanguard and Wise don't have collector's market, so it's not all that relevant to this. Also, Pokemon is nowhere as big as Yu-Gi-Oh! That is false. Pokemon is the biggest media franchise in the world. Now, if you want to say the card game, that is true. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has way more sales and like 10x the regionals. That is true. From a card game only perspective, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is bigger than Pokemon, and that's also a video I need to make. So MTG plus Pokemon are built on rotation, so they will make new cards but just copy and paste the effects. So cards become undesirable after rotation. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an eternal format and built around archetypes. There is always going to be one version of the Winged Dragon of Ra, and all new cards have to be built around it. That is why Ghost Rare Winged Dragon of Ra jumped from 100 to 200. Well, it's not out yet, so it hasn't jumped at all. Cards are eternal, and they will continue to get support to boost their playability. They are not going to make a completely different version of Dark Magician. Pokemon will have too many Charizards that have a same/similar name, but designed solely for their rotational format. Yu-Gi-Oh! All Dark Magicians have the same effect, text, etc. and support solely made around it. Once again, Jerry, thank you so much for your comment. Here's the thing though. MTG finances value is on cards that don't rotate. So it's actually the opposite. If you look at Power 9 and Black Lotus and all of that, they are played as the best cards in, what is it, Legacy or Vintage, one of these two, and they're the most powerful cards out there. So those values aren't from standard play. Now, that's not even the point of the video, however, because the point is actually, none of this matters. What do I mean by that? I mean, in the long term, playability is utterly irrelevant to the collector's market. Why? Well, look at, let's say, a PSA 10 corrected art Dark Paladin first edition from Magician's Force. It's selling for 8,000, 6,000, 8,000, 9,000, in that range. That card is not being played at all. No one gives a fuck about that card. That card is awful. Dark Magician Girl PSA 10. Once again, the MFC first edition sells for 6,000. That card is not being played. A better example of this is these expensive cards are in PSA cases. You cannot play them. When I talk about are Starlight and Collector Rares worth it, I do not mean buying them as a card, sleeving them up, and playing with them. Better yet, the majority of the major big league collectors and investors don't play the game. I barely play the game. The cards I invest in aren't playable in the game. They're slabbed. So when you say, oh, they will have to go up, blah, 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 because it's eternal. Well, no, because when you buy a first edition Blue Eyes White Dragon LOB in PSA 10 for $20,000, you don't do that to play with it. Because there's a Blue Eyes White Dragon for 50 cents out there with the same art, with the same foiling, with the same everything. It's not about the playability. It is about that little set number, that little first edition, maybe slightly different foil, maybe slightly different cardstock. It's about the long-term nostalgia towards that piece of history. It has nothing to do with playability. So when you say, yeah, there will be one version of the Winged Dragon of Ra, do you know what the most expensive version of a Winged Dragon of Ra is right now? It's a PSA 10 slabbed version of the card Winged Dragon of Ra from the Game Boy games that you can't play. You can't put it in your deck, it has no effect, it has a different card back and so forth. That is the most expensive Winged Dragon of Ra. Meanwhile, you have the Winged Dragon of Ra that you can play with the effect and so forth, and that's selling for, I don't know, a few bucks. Because when we talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Collecting and investing, we're not talking in the short term about playable cards. Please remind me how much Phantasme used to be, how much it is now. How much Ash used to be, how much it is now, and so forth. Cards that are playable will go down slightly longer term because their demand is fueled by playability, not nostalgia, not actual rarity. When I talk about rarity, I mean there's 100 copies of this card. There's 20 copies of this card in the world. If it's more, if it's like, oh, there's only 10,000 guys, there's only 10,000 of the 10,000 trillion, or there's only 1,000 of the 10,000 trillion. That is not rare. That is anything but rare. So yeah, really try to put that into your head. The biggest investors and collectors barely play the game. They just don't. Once again, we're going to our CEO. How are we going to call our CEO? Are we going to call him Bobby? Bobby, the CEO, just turned 38. He's making $1 million a year. And he's like, you know, I'm sitting here in my Lambo. I remember back in the day I played Blue Eyes White Dragon. You know what? I'm going to buy something lavish to put up on the wall. I'll buy the most expensive Blue Eyes White Dragon for $30,000 in like X years. That is what I'm looking for when I'm talking about investing and collecting. We're talking about the guys that literally do not play, that just want to have something from back in the day that is rare as fuck and that they can show off. That is a very big portion, and with which they also slightly diversify their asset allocation. They're like, well, I already have 5 million in stock. I already have 2 rental properties. I also have some bonds. And now I also want to have some expensive cardboard that will likely appreciate over time. That is what they're looking for. And when they're looking for that, they're not looking for a playable card to put in their deck. They're too busy running their hedge fund. That's the big difference. That is why playability has nothing to do with value in the long term. It may maybe slightly influence it in the sense that if a card was broken beyond belief for the longest time, many years ago, we're talking at least a decade, maybe multiple, maybe it will be more coveted in the long term because it was so iconic. A card like that could be Dark Armed Dragon. I'm sure many people now still remember the days of Dark Armed Dragon because of how powerful it was. And so maybe that makes it iconic, and maybe in the long term it could be a sort of collector's item when it's PSA 10 first edition and so forth. But the large majority of playable cards, back then Destiny Hero Disc Commander was super strong in that. Are you telling me that Destiny Hero Disc Commander is a good investment? It might be, but I doubt it. It's not going to 20,000 like an LOB Blue Eyes White Dragon first edition. Once again, you said Pokemon is built on rotation and that therefore they lose all their value. But that's way too short-term thinking. They lose their value when they rotate out. But the truly old cards, the collector's items, the base set first edition cards, these are huge. What Charizard is 80,000? Something like that? Unplayable? Yes, unplayable. MTG Shivan Dragon, whatever the fuck? Unplayable. Once again, all the true collector's items are not playable cards in the main formats. They are purely iconic, purely investment, and very often they're slabbed, so they cannot even be put into any decks. That was my little explanation. Of course, this is not meant in any hostile way. I can see how if you are only a player and you just look at card prices and you notice, whoa, on release they're so expensive, my meta deck, blah, 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 it's such an expensive card, it's an investment. I get that, but in general, you really need to disconnect your short-term ideas of price in these card games from the financial side that is far more long-term than these flips on triple tactics talents and stuff like that. That is all. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and I will see you soon. Ciao.